The wind carried memory across the foothills that afternoon, the kind that makes an old man close his eyes and see faces long buried. Sam Garrett sat in his rocking chair boots, worn smooth by 60 years of living hands, calloused by work that never truly ended. The Bighorn Mountains stood purple in the distance, eternal as judgment, patient as God. His grandson James stood beside the porch rail, 14 years old and already tall enough to see over the fence line. The boy had been quiet all morning, the way young men get when a question sits too heavy on their tongues. Finally, he turned to face his grandfather. "Grandpa Sam," the boy said, voice steady despite his youth. "How did you get that scar?" Sam's hand moved to his left cheek without thinking, fingertips tracing the line that ran from ear to jaw. The tissue had long since healed, white and smooth, but on cold mornings it still ached like fresh wound. He'd carried that mark for 16 years. 16 years since the night everything changed. "This scar," Sam said slowly, each word measured like water in drought country. "This reminds me of the woman who saved my life." He paused, watching a hawk circle overhead. "Your grandmother." James frowned. "But Grandma died when I was little. I don't remember much about her." "Then I need to start 16 years earlier," Sam said, "with a different woman, a woman I failed to save." The old man's eyes went distant, looking not at the mountains but through them, back to a time when his hair was still dark and his hands still quick. Back to 1885, when Wyoming territory was young and brutal and honest in its cruelty. "Her name was Catherine Blackwell," Sam continued. "And the day she died, I stopped being a lawman and started being a ghost." The scene shifted in his mind like clouds parting. 16 years before the night Grace Ashford changed everything, Sam had stood at a different grave, watching them lower a different coffin into Wyoming soil. Catherine Blackwell, 26 years old, dead from a bullet that came from her own brother's gun, though Warren Blackwell would spend the next 16 years believing Sam had pulled that trigger. Some lies Sam had learned are kinder than truth. Some lies a man carries because letting another man drown in guilt is worse than drowning in it yourself. Sam remembered standing in the rain that day in 1881, mud sucking at his boots, watching Warren's face crack like drought-dried earth. The pain there had been too raw, too complete. So when Warren looked at him with murder in his eyes and said, "You killed her," Sam had simply nodded. What else could he do? Tell Warren the truth, that in the chaos of the shootout on Bozeman Trail, with bullets flying and horses screaming, and Catherine's wagon caught in the crossfire, it had been Warren who fired the shot that struck his own sister. That Sam had seen it happen, but arrived too late to stop it. That Sam had held Catherine while she died, her blood warm on his hands, her last words a whisper. "Don't tell him. Let him think it was you. He can't live knowing." So Sam had carried that lie like a badge, and Warren had carried his hatred. And for 4 years they'd lived in the same county, breathing the same air, never speaking, two men bound by a woman's dying wish. By 1885, Sam had resigned from the Marshal Service, had bought 640 acres north of Sheridan with money saved from 6 years of wearing a badge, had built a life that was quiet and small and safe from the kind of choices that got women killed. He ran cattle, fixed fences, kept to himself. The people of Sheridan whispered about him the way folks whisper about storms that might return. They remembered the 7 men Sam had killed along the Bozeman Trail, all justified, all legal, all haunting him anyway. His ranch sat at the base of the mountains where the grassland met the pine, 200 head of Hereford cattle grazing land that had cost him $5 an acre. He'd built the house himself, log by log, every nail a small act of penance, as if building something could make up for failing to save her. 2 men worked for him, Dale Murphy, an Irish immigrant with a quick smile and quicker hands, 35 years old, and built like an ox, and Frank Chen, whose family had come from China to build the railroads and stayed because Wyoming didn't ask too many questions about where a man came from. Frank was 28, quiet as winter snow, deadly with a rifle. They worked the ranch together, 3 men who understood that silence wasn't emptiness, but sometimes the only honest language left. Sam's days followed patterns worn smooth by repetition. Up at dawn, check the cattle, mend fence, shoe horses. The work was hard and clean and required nothing of him but muscle and time. No moral choices, no life or death decisions. Just survival measured in acres and seasons. But some ghosts don't stay buried. Thomas Ashford had moved to the territory in 1882, a young man with Eastern manners and Western dreams. He'd bought 480 acres adjacent to Sam's land, paid $2,400 for dirt. Most folks thought too rocky for serious ranching. But Thomas had vision. He'd seen the way water collected in certain valleys, had studied the lay of the land like a man reading scripture. He'd come to Sam that first winter hat in hand asking advice. How deep to dig a well? Which cattle breeds survive the cold? How to read weather in the mountains? Sam had helped because it cost nothing to be decent, and Thomas was the kind of neighbor who fixed his own fences before they became someone else's problem. Over 3 years, something like friendship had grown between them. Not the close kind, not the sort where men shared secrets, but the quiet respect of ranchers who understood that survival meant cooperation. Thomas would help with Sam's branding. Sam would loan Thomas equipment. They'd nod to each other in town, acknowledge the unspoken bond of men working land that didn't forgive weakness. Thomas had married Grace in 1883, a woman from Cheyenne with dark hair and darker eyes and a spine that didn't bend easy. She was 25, then young enough to believe love conquered all, old enough to know it didn't. Sam had attended their wedding, had watched Thomas look at Grace the way men look at miracles, had felt something twist in his chest that might have been envy or might have been grief for Catherine. By June of 1885, Thomas had been working his land for 3 years. He'd built a decent house, a sturdy barn, kept 100 head of cattle alive through 2 hard winters. He was making it the way stubborn men make things work, through sheer refusal to quit. Then he'd found the spring. Thomas had come to Sam's ranch on a Tuesday evening, riding hard dust on his clothes and excitement in his eyes. Sam had been in the barn treating a horse's split hoof when Thomas burst in like a man carrying lightning. "Sam, I need advice on water law," Thomas had said, breathless. "I found something big." Sam had straightened slowly, reading the tension in Thomas's shoulders. "What kind of something?" "An artesian spring, north boundary of my property. I was digging a well and hit it at 30 feet. The water just came up on its own, Sam, flowing like a river from underground. I measured the flow, 50 gallons a minute, maybe more." Sam had gone still, then understanding flooding through him, cold as meltwater. 50 gallons a minute meant 72,000 gallons a day. In Wyoming territory, where water was scarcer than gold and twice as valuable, that kind of flow meant power, meant money, meant trouble. "You tell anyone else?" Sam had asked quietly. "Just you. I wanted to know the legal side before I filed claim." Sam had walked to the barn door, looking out at the darkening mountains, thinking about territorial water law and the prior appropriation doctrine that governed every drop in Wyoming. First in time, first in right. The first man to put water to beneficial use owned the rights forever. Under territorial law, Sam had explained, voice careful, you discovered it, you can claim it, but you need to file with the water commissioner within 90 days. Get it documented, get it legal. Don't tell anyone until the paperwork's done. Why not? Because men kill for water in this country, Thomas. And if you found what you say you found, it's worth more than your whole ranch. Thomas had nodded, a young face going serious. "I'll file first week of August. Give me time to get the survey done right." "Smart. Use George Mitchell in town. He's honest." Sam had paused. "And Thomas, be careful who you talk to about this. Some folks in Sheridan aren't particular about how they acquire property." Thomas had ridden away that evening with promises to keep quiet. Sam had watched him go, feeling the familiar weight of premonition settle between his shoulders. The kind of feeling that came before storms, before violence, before everything fell apart. He should have done more. Should have ridden with Thomas to file the claim. Should have stood guard while Thomas did the paperwork. Should have known that in Wyoming territory, 1885, water wasn't just wealth. It was war. 3 weeks later, Grace Ashford found her husband face down in the Powder River. Sam learned about it the next morning from Dale, who'd heard it in town. Thomas Ashford dead at 32. Sheriff Davis called it an accident. Said Thomas had been drinking, fell off his horse, hit his head on rocks, drowned in 3 feet of water. But Thomas didn't drink. Sam knew that the way he knew his own hands. Thomas had lost his father to whiskey and swore he'd never touch the stuff. So when Dale brought word of Thomas's death, of the sheriff's conclusions of the bottle found near the body, Sam felt the lie settle in his bones like old bullets. He'd ridden to the death scene that night after the body was removed, had studied the ground by lantern light while Sheridan slept. found things the sheriff had missed or chosen not to see. The saddle straps on Thomas's horse cut clean through with a sharp blade not worn through by age. Boot prints in the mud, a distinctive notch worn into the right heel. A whiskey bottle that smelled wrong, too sweet, like someone had doctored it with laudanum to make a sober man dizzy. Sam had stood there in the dark beside the river that had taken Thomas's life and understood with terrible clarity what had happened. Someone had poisoned Thomas, waited for him to get weak and disoriented, cut his saddle so he'd fall, let the river do the rest, clean, simple, untraceable if you didn't know what to look for. Sam knew what to look for. 6 years as a U.S. Marshal had taught him to read violence the way other men read newspapers. This wasn't accident. This was murder made to look like misfortune. He'd wanted to tell Grace, wanted to ride to her ranch and lay out everything he'd found. But what good would it do? He had suspicions, not proof. The sheriff was either incompetent or complicit, and without evidence that could stand in court, all Sam would do was give Grace grief without justice. So he'd kept silent, watched from a distance as Grace buried her husband, watched as she tried to hold the ranch together alone, watched as the harassment started. Because whoever had killed Thomas wanted the land, wanted the water rights, wanted the spring that flowed like silver beneath Ashford's soil. And a widow alone was easier to scare than a man with dreams. The first incident came a week after the funeral. Grace's fence line cut in 3 places. Cattle scattered across 2 counties. Took her 3 days to round them up riding alone because she couldn't afford to hire help. Sam had ridden over on the 4th day, offered assistance. Grace had thanked him with exhausted eyes and said she'd manage. Pride, Sam understood. The kind that keeps you upright when everything else wants you horizontal. The second incident came 2 weeks later. Rocks thrown down Grace's well, fouling the water. She'd had to dig a new well, back-breaking work that cost her $150 she probably didn't have. Sam had wanted to help, but Grace kept her distance, and Sam didn't know how to cross it without seeming like another man trying to take advantage of a widow's weakness. The third incident was worse. Grace's horses, 3 of them, spooked out of the barn in the middle of the night. One broke a leg and had to be put down. Grace had done it herself, one shot clean through the skull because she couldn't afford a veterinarian and wouldn't ask for charity. Dale had seen her in town afterward buying ammunition with shaking hands. Had told Sam that Grace looked like a woman being ground down by degrees, losing pieces of herself with each new violation. Sam had started writing the boundary between their properties at night. Not close enough to be intrusive, just close enough to hear if trouble came calling. 3 months after Thomas died, Sam was sleeping 4 hours a night and spending the rest watching shadows, waiting for the inevitable escalation. It came on an October evening, cold enough that breath steamed and frost painted the grass white. Sam had been checking fence line when he heard the voice, low, male, coming from the direction of Grace's barn. He'd moved quietly through the dark, hand on his revolver until he could make out words. A woman alone can't hold this land. Sell it before something worse happens. Sam had recognized that voice, had heard it 100 times in Sheridan. Jack Malone, trail boss for Warren Blackwell, a man with scarred knuckles and dead eyes and a reputation for doing whatever Warren paid him to do. Sam had almost confronted him then, almost stepped out of the shadows and ended it with bullets or fists or whatever Jack chose. But movement near the house had stopped him. Grace stood in her doorway, rifle raised, nightgown white in the moonlight. "Get off my land," she'd said, voice steady as bedrock. Jack had laughed. "Just offering friendly advice, Mrs. Ashford." "I don't need your advice. I need you gone." Jack had ridden away, still laughing, and Sam had stayed hidden, watching Grace stand alone in her doorway until the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then she'd gone inside, and Sam had seen the lamp glow through her window for hours afterward. A woman too scared to sleep, too stubborn to run. That night, Sam had made a decision. Grace Ashford needed help whether she knew how to ask for it or not. And Sam had spent 4 years running from the kind of fight he'd been trained for. Maybe it was time to stop running. But before he could act, events overtook intention. The Territorial Water Commissioner arrived in Sheridan the 3rd week of October, a bureaucrat from Cheyenne with paperwork and authority. Sam heard about it from Frank, who'd been in the general store when the commissioner made his announcement. Warren Blackwell had filed a water claim for a newly discovered artesian spring. On property he claimed Thomas Ashford had used as collateral for a $5,000 debt. Warren had an IOU signed by Thomas granting water rights in case of default. Sam had gone cold hearing that, because Thomas never borrowed money from Warren. Thomas had been careful with debt, almost paranoid about it. And $5,000, Thomas's entire ranch wasn't worth $5,000. The IOU was forged. Had to be. But proving it meant challenging Warren Blackwell, the biggest landowner in Sheridan County, a man who owned the sheriff and half the county commission and had fingers in every business from the bank to the lumber mill. It meant going to war, and Sam had sworn he was done with war. Then Grace came to him. She'd ridden up to his ranch at sunset horse lathered face drawn with exhaustion and something harder. Desperation, maybe. Or the kind of anger that burns clean through fear. Sam had been on the porch cleaning his revolver when she dismounted. She'd stood there in the dying light dress, dusty from the right hands clenched at her sides. "Mr. Garrett," she'd said, formal despite everything. "I know we're not friends, but you knew Thomas. You know he was honest." "Yes, ma'am." "The water commissioner says Thomas owed Warren Blackwell $5,000. Says Thomas signed over water rights as collateral." Her voice cracked but held. "Thomas never borrowed money from Warren. Never. I need someone to believe me." Sam had set down the revolver, stood slowly. "I believe you, Mrs. Ashford." "Then will you look at this?" She'd pulled a folded paper from her pocket. The IOU. Her hands shook holding it. "Tell me if that's Thomas's signature." Sam had taken the document, moved to where lamplight fell across the porch, studied the signature. Thomas Ashford, written in confident script. It looked right. The slant was correct. The pressure even. But something was off. He'd seen Thomas sign documents a dozen times. And Thomas had a distinctive quirk. The cross on his T always extended slightly to the left, a small flourish he'd explained once came from learning penmanship from his left-handed mother. This signature had the T crossed straight. Perfect but wrong. "It's forged," Sam said quietly. "Well done, but forged." Grace had swayed, then relief and rage warring in her expression. "Can you prove it?" "Not in any court that matters. Not against Warren's influence." "Then what do I do?" Sam had looked at her, then really looked. Saw a woman who'd buried her husband 3 months ago, who'd fought alone to hold land that men were systematically trying to steal, who'd stood in her doorway with a rifle and refused to break despite everything designed to break her. He'd thought about Catherine, about how he'd failed to save her, about how he'd spent 4 years hiding from the kind of fight he'd been trained for, about Marshall Henry Stone, his mentor, who told him once that the measure of a man wasn't whether he fell, but whether he got back up. "Mrs. Ashford," Sam had said carefully, "has Thomas ever mentioned finding anything unusual on your property? Any water source?" Her eyes had widened fractionally. "How did you know?" "Because Thomas came to me about it. Artesian spring, northern boundary, worth more than the whole ranch." Sam had paused. "That's what Warren wants. That's why he killed Thomas." The word hung between them. Killed. Not accident, not misfortune. Murder. Grace's face had gone very still. "You know for certain?" "I found evidence the night Thomas died. Cut saddle straps. Boot prints with a distinctive mark. A doctored whiskey bottle." Sam had met her eyes. "But knowing and proving are different things." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I had suspicions, not proof. And I thought maybe you'd be safer not knowing." "I'm not safe," Grace had said, voice hard now. "I haven't been safe since the day Thomas died. Someone wants me gone, Mr. Garrett, and I'm tired of running scared." Sam had recognized that tone, the sound of a person reaching their breaking point and deciding to push back instead of breaking. He'd heard it in his own voice 4 years ago when Catherine died. The difference was Grace had someone to push back with. "If I help you," Sam had said slowly, "you need to understand something. Warren Blackwell and I have history, bad history. This won't be clean or easy." "What kind of history?" Sam had looked away toward the mountains. "The kind where someone I loved died and Warren spent 16 years blaming me for it. His sister Catherine." "Did you kill her?" "No, but I let him believe I did, because the truth was worse." Grace had been quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Garrett, I'm not asking you to die for me. I'm asking you to help me live, to help me keep what's mine by right, To help me prove Thomas didn't die by accident. She'd stepped closer. Can you do that? And Sam, who'd spent 4 years hiding from exactly this kind of question, found himself nodding. Because some fights you don't choose. Some fights choose you. And standing on his porch with a widow asking for help, he was uniquely qualified to give. Sam understood that running time was over. Yes, ma'am, he'd said. I can do that. Relief had washed across Grace's face so completely that Sam realized how close she'd been to giving up. How much courage it had taken to come here. To ask help from a man she barely knew. What do we do first, she'd asked. First we prove the IOU is forged. Then we prove Thomas discovered the spring. Then we prove Warren had him killed. Sam had picked up his revolver, checked the cylinder from habit. But you need to understand something, Mrs. Ashford. We do this legal first, guns last. I spent 6 years as a U.S. Marshal learning that law matters more than vengeance. If we go after Warren the wrong way, we're no better than him. And if the legal way doesn't work, Sam had looked at her, then seeing not just a widow, but a woman willing to fight for what was hers. Seeing someone who reminded him why he'd worn a badge in the first place. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. To stand between the innocent and the cruel. Then we do what's necessary, he'd said quietly. But we try it right first. Grace had nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. When do we start? Tomorrow we ride to Cheyenne, talk to the territorial attorney, file the proper paperwork, build a case that can't be ignored. That's 2 days of riding. Yes, ma'am. I've never been to Cheyenne. Then I'll show you. Sam had paused. One more thing, Mrs. Ashford. While we're working together, call me Sam. Mr. Garrett was my father, and he's been dead 20 years. A ghost of a smile had crossed her face. Then call me Grace. Mrs. Ashford makes me feel like I'm at church. They'd shaken hands, then a formal agreement between two people bound by shared loss and common purpose. Sam's hand had been rough from ranch work. Grace's smaller, but just as calloused. The handshake of people who knew labor, who understood that survival meant calluses. After Grace rode away, Sam had stood on his porch watching darkness settle over the land. Dale had come out of the barn, leading a horse to water, and stopped when he saw Sam's expression. Boss, we're going to war, Dale, Sam had said quietly, against Warren Blackwell, against whoever killed Thomas Ashford, against the whole damn system if that's what it takes. Dale had nodded slowly. About time. Frank and I had been wondering when you'd stop hiding. I wasn't hiding, I was waiting. For what? For someone worth fighting for. And as stars appeared above the Bighorn Mountains, Sam had thought about Catherine, about Thomas, about all the people who died while he'd been too broken or too careful or too afraid to do what needed doing. Thought about Marshal Henry Stone, who taught him that justice wasn't about being fearless, but about acting despite fear. Tomorrow he'd ride to Cheyenne with Grace Ashford, would start building a legal case against the most powerful man in Sheridan County, would set in motion events that would end with bullets or justice or both. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Sam Garrett felt like something other than a ghost. Felt like the man he'd been before Catherine died, before the weight of failure had bent his shoulders and stolen his purpose. He felt like a marshal again. Not the badge, not the authority, but the oath he'd taken. The promise to stand for those who couldn't stand alone, to bring balance where cruelty tipped the scales. Grace Ashford had come to him broken and desperate and brave, and Sam had made her a promise. One he intended to keep even if it cost everything, because some promises are worth dying for. And protecting a widow from men who'd murdered her husband, that was the kind of promise Marshal Henry Stone would have called righteous. The kind Sam had been waiting 4 years to make again. Dawn came cold over the mountains, frost painting, the grass silver breath hanging white in the air. Sam stood beside his horse, checking the saddle one final time, while Grace emerged from the barn where she'd slept on clean hay rather than ride home in darkness. She looked tired, but determined, the kind of tired that came from choosing action over safety. Dale brought 2 canteens filled with freshwater provisions wrapped in oilcloth. Frank checked Grace's stirrups, adjusted them without asking, the quiet competence of men who understood that small preparations prevented large disasters. 2 days to Cheyenne, Sam said, swinging into his saddle. We ride steady, not hard. Save the horses for when we need speed. Grace mounted with practiced ease, settled into her seat like a woman born to it. I've ridden longer. I don't doubt it. Sam turned his horse toward the rising sun. But we're not racing. We're building a case. Everything we do from here needs to look legal and proper. No room for Warren to claim we acted outside the law. They rode out as light broke across the territory, two figures on horseback moving through country that didn't forgive mistakes. Behind them, Dale and Frank watched from the porch rifles ready prepared to defend Sam's ranch in case Warren tried something while the boss was gone. The land unfolded in rolling waves of grass and stone, broken by creek beds mostly dry this late in the season. Sam knew every ridge and valley between Sheridan and Cheyenne, had ridden this route dozens of times during his marshal years. The territory looked peaceful in morning light, but he'd learned long ago that beauty and danger weren't opposites in Wyoming. They were twins. Grace rode beside him in silence for the first hour, lost in thoughts. Sam didn't interrupt. Finally, as they crested a hill overlooking the Powder River Valley, she spoke. "Tell me about the law," she said. "The water rights. I need to understand what we're fighting for." Sam nodded, gathering his thoughts into words a woman with no legal training could grasp. Wyoming follows what's called the prior appropriation doctrine. Different from back east, where water belongs to whoever owns the land beside it. Out here, water belongs to whoever uses it first. First in time, first in right. Thomas found the spring first. He did, but finding isn't enough. You have to put the water to beneficial use, irrigation, livestock, domestic consumption, and you have to file a claim with the Territorial Water Commissioner documenting when you discovered it, how much flows, what you intend to use it for. Grace's jaw tightened. Thomas was going to file in August, 3 days after he died. Which is why Warren killed him. Sam's voice was flat, stating fact without emotion. With Thomas dead and no filed claim, the water was up for grabs. Warren forged that IOU to make it look like Thomas owed him money, used the debt to claim the water rights as collateral. But that's fraud. Well, it is. But proving fraud means proving Thomas never borrowed the money, which means proving the signature is forged, which means finding an expert who'll testify against Warren Blackwell in a county where Warren owns half the officials. They rode in silence after that, the magnitude of what they faced settling between them like snow. By midday, they'd covered 20 miles, stopped to rest the horses beside a creek still running with snowmelt from higher elevations. Sam built a small fire, boiled coffee in a tin pot, while Grace sat on a flat rock staring at nothing. "You think we can win?" she asked finally. Sam poured coffee into 2 cups, handed her one. "I think we can build a case strong enough that Warren can't ignore it. Whether that's the same as winning depends on how the law works versus how power works." "You sound cynical." "I sound experienced." Sam sipped the bitter coffee, welcomed the burn. "I wore a badge for 6 years, Grace. Saw plenty of times when the law was on one side and the verdict on another. Justice isn't automatic. It's something you have to fight for every single time." Grace cupped the coffee between her palms, warming her hands. "Marshal Stone, the man who trained you. What would he say about this?" Sam smiled, despite himself remembering. "Henry would say that doing right isn't about winning. It's about standing for principle, even when standing costs everything. He'd say that a man who won't fight for justice when it's hard won't fight for it when it's easy either." Where is he now? "Dead, 5 years ago, chasing outlaws into Montana territory. Took a bullet in the spine, died slow." Sam's voice went distant. "I was in Sheridan when it happened. Didn't even know until 3 weeks later when they brought his body back." "I'm sorry." "So am I. Henry was the best man I ever knew. Taught me everything worth knowing about being a lawman, about being a man, really." Sam finished his coffee, tossed the grounds into the fire. "He used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when no one will ever know except them and God." As they rode on through afternoon heat, the sun climbing high and brutal, the kind that baked the land and made distances shimmer like water. Grace asked questions about the legal process, about territorial courts, about how cases worked when you had evidence, but no friendly officials. Sam answered each one carefully, building her knowledge brick by brick. By evening, they'd covered 40 miles, made camp in a cottonwood grove beside a spring Sam knew from previous trips. He unsaddled the horses, rubbed them down, while Grace gathered wood for a fire. They worked in comfortable silence, 2 people learning the rhythm of cooperation. After dark, sitting on opposite sides of the fire with dinner eaten and dishes cleaned, Grace spoke again. You loved her, Catherine. It wasn't a question. Sam looked up from the stick he'd been whittling, met Grace's eyes across the flames. I did. And Warren blamed you for 16 years for something he did himself. He needed someone to blame. Couldn't very well blame himself without losing his mind. So I let him blame me. Sam returned to his whittling. Seemed kinder at the time. That's a heavy burden to carry. Lighter than the one Warren's been carrying. Guilt without acknowledgement eats a man from inside. At least I knew the truth. Grace pulled her blanket tighter against the cold settling over the land. Do you think he knows deep down that it was his bullet that killed her? Sam considered that. I think part of him knows. The part he doesn't let himself examine too closely. And I think that knowing buried under all his denial is what turned him into the kind of man who'd kill Thomas for a water source. How does that happen? How does grief turn someone cruel? Same way anything corrupts. Small choices that seemed justified at the time. Warren probably told himself the first shady land deal was necessary for survival. Then the second was just smart business. Then the third was what everyone did. By the time he got to murder, he'd already crossed so many smaller lines that one more didn't seem like such a leap. Sam set down his knife, looked at Grace directly. That's why we're doing this legal. Why we're building a proper case, because the moment we become like Warren, the moment we decide law doesn't matter and only power does, we've already lost what we're fighting for. Grace nodded slowly. Thomas would have liked you. He talked about you sometimes. Said you were the kind of man Wyoming needed more of. Thomas was a good man, better than most. Sam stood stretched muscles sore from riding. Get some sleep. We've got another full day tomorrow before we reach Cheyenne. The second day passed similarly. Miles of grassland broken by rocky outcrops. Pronghorn antelope watching from safe distances. Hawks circling overhead, patient and hungry. They talked less, both conserving energy for what waited in Cheyenne. They reached the territorial capital at sunset, the town sprawling along the railroad tracks, buildings newer and taller than anything in Sheridan. Sam led them to a boarding house he knew run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson, who asked no questions and kept her rooms clean. Grace took a room on the second floor. Sam took one on the first proper distance maintained. After they'd both washed trail dust away and eaten a hot meal, Sam walked Grace to her door. Tomorrow we see Marcus Webb, he said, territorial attorney. He's sharp and honest, which makes him rare. But he can't work miracles. He can only work with what we give him. Will he help us? If the case is solid, yes. Webb doesn't like corruption, doesn't like men who think money puts them above the law. Sam paused, but he won't take a weak case. Can't afford to. Every loss makes the next case harder to win. Grace's hand rested on the doorknob. Thank you, Sam, for all of this. I know it costs you getting involved. Some things are worth the wait. She smiled, tired but genuine. Henry Stone would be proud of you. Sam felt something catch in his chest. I hope so, Grace. I surely hope so. Morning brought them to Marcus Webb's office, a second-story room overlooking the Main Street papers, stacked on every surface in organized chaos. Webb himself was 50, balding with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink stains on his fingers. He looked like a clerk, but thought like a general. Sam Garrett, Webb said, rising from behind his desk. Haven't seen you since you resigned. Thought you'd become a hermit up in Sheridan. Close enough. Sam shook Webb's hand. This is Grace Ashford. She's got a problem that needs your particular talents. Webb gestured to chairs. Tell me. Sam laid out the case methodically. Thomas's discovery of the artesian spring, the timing, the death 3 days before Thomas could file claim, the forged IOU, Warren's water claim based on that forgery. Webb listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, eyes sharp behind the spectacles. When Sam finished, Webb leaned back in his chair. You have proof the IOU is forged. The signature's wrong. Thomas had a distinctive way of crossing his T. This one doesn't match. You have documents with Thomas's real signature for comparison. Grace pulled papers from her bag. Land deed, marriage certificate. 3 letters Thomas had written to the Territorial Land Office. Webb studied each one, comparing signatures with a magnifying glass. You're right, he said finally. The cross on the T is different. Subtle, but different. He set down the glass. But subtle won't win in court. You need an expert, someone who can testify about handwriting analysis. And you need Thomas's original survey map proving he discovered the spring. We don't have the survey, Grace admitted. Then get it. Because without documentation showing Thomas found that spring before Warren filed his claim, you've got nothing. Warren will say Thomas never discovered anything. We'll say the IOU is legitimate and Thomas defaulted on the debt. Webb's voice was gentle but firm. Water law is simple, Mrs. Ashford. First beneficial use wins. You need proof Thomas had first use. How long do we have? Sam asked. Webb checked a calendar on his desk. Warren filed October 15th. Under territorial procedure, his claim becomes legal in 30 days unless challenged with evidence. That gives you until November 15th, 3 weeks from today. 3 weeks. Sam felt the deadline settle like a noose. And if we can't find the survey map, then Warren wins, gets the water rights, and there's nothing the law can do about it. They left Webb's office with a clear mission and a ticking clock. Find Thomas's survey map. Find it in 3 weeks. Or lose everything. The ride back to Sheridan took 2 days of hard pushing, both of them silent with urgency. They arrived at Grace's ranch on the third evening, horses exhausted, riders more so. Sam helped Grace unsaddle, check the property for signs of intrusion. Everything looked untouched, but Sam's instincts prickled, the kind of quiet that came before storms. Tomorrow we start searching, he said. Thomas hid that map somewhere he thought was safe. Grace nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Where would he hide something that important? Somewhere only you would know, somewhere that meant something to both of you. Sam mounted his horse. Think about it tonight. I'll come by at first light, and we'll tear this place apart if we have to. But Grace didn't need until morning. Sam was halfway home when he heard hoofbeats behind him, turned to see Grace riding hard, something clutched in her hand. She pulled up beside him, face flushed with excitement and tears. The oak tree, she said breathlessly. There's an old oak tree on the north boundary. Thomas and I carved our initials there when we first bought the land. In G 1882. She held up a tin box, small and rusted. I dug under the roots. This was buried there. Sam's pulse quickened. You opened it. Not yet. Wanted you here. They rode to Sam's ranch into the barn where lamplight gave privacy. Grace set the box on a workbench, hands shaking as she pried open the lid. Inside lay folded papers, a leather journal, an envelope with Grace's name written in Thomas's careful hand. Sam opened the papers first. Survey maps, detailed drawings showing the Ashford property, the location of the artesian spring, measurements of water flow, notes about soil composition. At the bottom, surveyor George Mitchell's signature and the date June 20th, 1885. This is it, Sam breathed. Legal documentation that Thomas discovered the spring 4 months before Warren filed claim. Grace opened the letter, read aloud with a voice that broke. My dearest Grace, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my fears were not unfounded. The spring I discovered is our future. Fight for it. Do not let them take what is ours by right. Trust Sam Garrett. He is the only honest man in Sheridan. He will help you if you ask. I love you. Always. Thomas. Silence filled the barn. Grace's tears fell onto the letter ink, blurring. Sam looked away, giving her privacy for grief. Finally, Grace wiped her eyes, carefully refolded the letter. He knew. Even before he died, he knew someone would come for the land. The diary, Sam said gently. May I? Grace handed it over. Sam opened to the last entries, read, Thomas's increasingly worried notes. July 20th. Warren Blackwell approached me today. Offered $20,000 for the water rights. I refused. He said accidents happen to stubborn men. His eyes were cold when he said it. I am frightened, but I will not give in. July 25th. Someone has been watching the house. I see movement at night near the boundary. I sleep with my rifle now. July 28th. Final entry. Tomorrow I ride to Cheyenne to file the water claim. If anything happens to me, Grace knows where to find these papers. God protect her. Sam closed the diary, jaw tight with rage, carefully controlled. This is evidence, Grace. Documentary proof that Warren threatened Thomas. That Thomas feared for his life. Combined with the survey map and the forged IOU, we have a case. What do we do now? Now we go see Webb again. File the claim officially, present this evidence, force Warren's hand. But Grace shook her head. No, not yet. Sam looked at her sharply. Why not? Because the moment we file, Warren will know we found the map. He'll escalate, might run, might destroy evidence. Grace's eyes were hard now, grief transforming into something sharper. You said we need to trap him, so let's trap him. Sam studied her, seeing not the broken widow who'd come to him days ago, but a woman discovering her own capacity for strategy. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we let Warren believe he's winning. Make him think I'm ready to give up. Draw his people out for one more intimidation. Catch them in the act. Grace's voice was steady. Then we have him for harassment, fraud, and conspiracy. Multiple charges, harder to slip away from. It was risky. It was dangerous. It was also smart. You'd be bait, Sam said quietly. I've been bait for 3 months. At least this time I'll have you watching my back. Sam considered it, weighed risk against reward, finally nodded. We do it your way, but we do it smart. I train you first. Teach you to defend yourself properly. Make sure when Warren's men come, you're ready. How long? A week. Enough time to teach you shooting, tracking, basic self-defense. Enough time to set up the trap properly. Sam met her eyes. And Grace, once we start this, there's no going back. Warren will know we're coming for him. He'll respond with everything he has. Good, Grace said simply. I want him to know. I want him to understand that he didn't break me, that Thomas didn't die for nothing. Training started the next morning at Sam's ranch. Dale and Frank set up targets while Sam brought out weapons. A Winchester rifle lever action, the kind that could fire 15 rounds without reloading. A Colt .45 revolver, heavy in Grace's hand, but balanced. A gun isn't about killing, Sam said, standing behind her as she held the rifle. It's about confidence. If you hold it right, move right, look like you know what you're doing, you might never need to fire. But if you do need to fire, you damn well better hit what you're aiming at. He taught her stance, breathing, how to sight down the barrel, account for wind and distance. Grace was a natural, hitting 7 out of 10 targets at 50 feet by the end of the first day. Your father taught you, Sam observed. He did. Died when I was 14. Said every person should know how to protect themselves, man or woman. Grace lowered the rifle. Thomas never liked guns, thought they were tools of violence. They are, but sometimes violence is the only language brutal men understand. Sam reloaded the rifle. Your father was right. Everyone should know how to defend themselves. Doesn't mean you have to use it, just means you have the choice. They practiced tracking next, reading footprints, identifying distinctive marks. Sam showed her the boot print he'd found at Thomas's death scene, the notch in the right heel. That's Jack Malone's mark, Sam said. Warren's trail boss. If you see that print near your property, you know exactly who's been watching. Grace studied the imprint, memorizing every detail. I'll remember. On the 4th day, Sam taught her law. Not courtroom procedure, but property rights. Water doctrine, the specific statutes governing land ownership in Wyoming territory. He made her recite them until she could quote chapter and verse. Knowledge is a weapon, Sam said, maybe stronger than bullets. When you know your rights, know the law, no one can intimidate you with legal threats. By the 7th night, Grace could shoot, track, and argue law better than most men in the territory. Peterson, an older rancher from the neighboring property, had started helping with evening chores at Grace's ranch, providing another set of eyes when Sam couldn't be there. She'd transformed from victim to warrior, and Sam watched the change with something that might have been pride. They were cleaning rifles in the barn when Grace spoke quietly. You're a good teacher, Sam. Henry Stone was better. I'm just passing on what he taught me. Did you teach Kitherbe? Sam reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a small photograph he'd carried for 16 years. Catherine Blackwell smiling in a Sunday dress, eyes bright with life that hadn't yet been stolen. She was 24 here, 2 years before she died. Warren gave me this after the funeral, said he couldn't bear to look at it. Sam's voice was barely a whisper. I've carried it every day since, reminder of what I failed to protect. You didn't pull the trigger. No, but I should have seen the danger, should have made her stay behind instead of letting her ride into that situation. Sam returned to cleaning, movements automatic. I've spent 16 years thinking about what I could have done differently. And what conclusion did you reach? That the past doesn't change no matter how much you wish it would. That guilt is just another kind of prison. That the only way forward is to do better next time. He looked at Grace. This is my next time. Teaching you to survive, making sure I don't fail again. Grace reached across the workbench, covered his hand with hers. You won't fail, Sam, because I'm not Catherine. I'm not waiting for someone to save me. I'm learning to save myself. The touch lasted a moment, then Grace withdrew, returned to cleaning her rifle. Sam felt the absence of her hand like cold air, but didn't comment. Some things were better left unspoken. On the 10th night at 2 in the morning, the intruder came. Sam was sleeping in the barn, giving Grace his bed inside the house while he maintained proper distance. The sound of breaking glass jerked him awake, hand finding his revolver before his eyes fully opened. He moved through darkness toward the house, saw a shadow at the window, heard fumbling with the latch. Then Grace's voice, clear and steady. Stop right there or I shoot through the door. The shadow froze. Grace continued. I've got a Winchester pointed at your chest. I can hit 10 targets at 50 feet. You're 5 feet away. Make your choice. The shadow stepped back, hands raised. Sam circled wide, came up behind the man, revolver pressed to his spine. Don't move, Sam said quietly. The man went rigid. Sam grabbed his collar, spun him into lamplight, spilling from the house. Jack Malone, Warren's trail boss, eyes wide with surprise and calculation. Grace emerged from the house, rifle raised, nightgown covered by a heavy coat. He tried to break in. So I see. Sam pressed the revolver harder. Jack, you're trespassing. That's a crime. I could shoot you legal right now and no jury in Wyoming would convict me. I wasn't doing nothing, just checking to make sure Mrs. Ashford was safe. At 2 in the morning, bursting in her window, Jack said nothing, jaw tight. Sam searched him, quickly found a folded paper in his coat pocket. Opened it, read by lamplight. An invitation. Warren wants to talk. Meet with him at the Sheridan Hotel noon tomorrow. Come alone. Warren sent you, Sam said. He wants to make a deal. Peaceful-like. And you thought breaking a window at midnight was the way to deliver that message. Jack shrugged, trying for casual and missing. Wanted to make sure she got it. Sam released him with a shove. Tell Warren we'll be there, but Grace won't be alone. She'll have me. The message says alone. Then Warren will have to adjust his expectations. Sam gestured with the revolver. Now get out of here before I decide trespassing is worth shooting over. Jack mounted his horse, but before riding away, leaned down from the saddle. You're making a mistake, Garrett. Warren owns this county. You can't win. We'll see. Sam watched him disappear into darkness, then turned to Grace. You handled that well. I was terrified. Didn't show. That's what matters. Sam noticed her hands shaking now that danger had passed. Fear is fine. Everyone feels it. The question is whether you let it control you or you control it. Grace set down the rifle, wrapped her arms around herself. Do you think it's really a meeting or a trap? Probably both. Warren wants to intimidate you into selling, but he's smart enough to try negotiation before escalation. Sam picked up the dropped paper, studied it again. Tomorrow we go to that hotel, but we go prepared. Dale and Frank will position themselves outside with rifles. If things go wrong, they'll provide cover. And if Warren makes a reasonable offer, then we listen, but we don't accept. Not yet, not until we understand what he's really after. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Sam cleaned weapons while Grace wrote down everything she wanted to say to Warren, organizing her thoughts like a general planning battle. By dawn, they were as ready as they could be. The Sheridan Hotel stood on Main Street, 2 stories of lumber and glass, the finest building in a town that mostly lived in log cabins and false front stores. Sam and Grace arrived at noon, exactly. Dale and Frank already positioned on rooftops across the street with clear sightlines. Warren's suite was on the 2nd floor. A clerk led them upstairs that creaked, knocked on a heavy door. Warren himself opened it, looking older than Sam remembered, gray, threading through his dark hairlines etched deep around his eyes. Sam, Warren said quietly, it's been a long time. 4 years. 4 years. Warren's gaze shifted to Grace. Mrs. Ashford, thank you for coming. Please sit. The room was furnished with Eastern luxury. Velvet chairs, a mahogany desk, windows overlooking the street. Warren poured whiskey into 3 glasses, offered them around. Sam and Grace both declined. Warren sat behind the desk, fingers steepled. I'll get straight to the point. I want to buy Ashford Ranch. I'm prepared to offer $10,000. That's double the market value. Grace's face remained neutral. Why so generous? Because I don't want conflict. Your husband's death was a tragedy. I'd like to help his widow start fresh somewhere safer. Safer than my own home. Mrs. Ashford, a woman alone on a ranch, is vulnerable. Accidents happen. I'd hate to see you get hurt. Sam leaned forward. That sounded like a threat, Warren. It was an observation. Observed by the same people who've been harassing Grace for 3 months, cutting fences, poisoning wells, releasing snakes near her house. Warren's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think you killed Thomas because he found an artesian spring on his land. I think you forged an IOU to claim water rights that don't belong to you. I think you've been trying to scare Grace into selling so you can steal what you couldn't acquire legally. The room went very quiet. Warren sipped his whiskey, set down the glass with deliberate care. Those are serious accusations, Sam. Do you have proof? Enough to ask questions, starting with why Jack Malone's boot prints were at the scene of Thomas's death. Jack works for me. He goes many places, including Grace's property at midnight, breaking windows. Warren smiled thinly. If Jack overstepped, I apologize. He's protective, sometimes too much so. Sam stood, frustration building. This isn't about apologies, Warren. This is about murder, about fraud, about you thinking you can take whatever you want because you own half the county. I own what I've earned. Warren stood as well, facing Sam across the desk. Everything I have, I built. Every acre, every dollar. While you were playing Marshall, I was creating an empire. And how many people did you destroy building it? Warren's control cracked slightly, pain flickering across his face. You want to talk about destruction? Sam, let's talk about Catherine. The name fell like a stone into deep water. Grace went still, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. You killed her, Warren continued, voice low and hard. 16 years ago, you put a bullet in my sister, the only family I had, the only person who ever gave a damn about me. Sam felt the old lie settle over him like a familiar coat. He could continue the deception. Let Warren keep believing. But Grace deserved truth, and maybe Warren did too. After 16 years of carrying another man's guilt, maybe it was time to set it down. No, Warren, Sam said quietly. I didn't kill Catherine. You did. The room went absolutely silent. Warren's face drained of color. What? Bozeman Trail, 1881. Shootout with robbers. Catherine in the wagon, bullets flying. You fired at the bandits, trying to protect her. Sam's voice was steady, delivering truth like testimony. Your bullet hit her in the chest. I was 50 feet away. I saw it happen. Saw your gun, saw the muzzle flash, saw her fall. Warren sat down hard on all strength, leaving his legs. No, that's not... You killed her. The marshal's report said... The report said what I told them to say, because Catherine's last words to me were, don't tell him. Let him think it was you. He can't live knowing. Sam moved around the desk, knelt so they were eye level. She loved you, Warren. Loved you enough to die protecting you from the truth. So I let you hate me, let you blame me, because hating me was easier than hating yourself. Warren's hands shook, whiskey glass slipping from his fingers to shatter on the floor. 16 years of rage and grief and carefully maintained hatred crumbling in the space of a revelation. I killed her, Warren whispered. All this time, I killed my own sister. It was an accident, Warren, a terrible accident in a moment of chaos. And you let me believe, let me spend 16 years. Warren looked up, eyes wet. Why would you do that? Because Catherine asked me to, because some lies are kinder than truth, because I thought you'd destroy yourself if you knew. Warren laughed, broken and bitter. And what do you think I've been doing for 16 years, building an empire on blood money, becoming exactly the kind of man who'd kill Thomas Ashford for a water source? He stood, moved to the window, stared out at the street below. You should have told me, should have let me face it. Maybe, but I can't change the past. None of us can. Warren turned, face composed now, but eyes haunted. No, we can't. He looked at Grace. Mrs. Ashford, I didn't kill your husband, but I know who did, and I know why. Grace leaned forward. Tell me. Jack Malone. On my orders, though, I didn't say kill. I said convince Thomas to sell. Said do whatever was necessary. Warren's voice was hollow. Jack interpreted that broadly. Put laudanum in Thomas's whiskey. Cut his saddle straps. Made it look accidental. And the forged IOU. That was Jack's idea, too. Thought it would give us legal cover for the water claim. Warren moved back to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out papers. Here, the original survey Thomas commissioned. Jack stole it from your house after the funeral. And here's my confession, written and signed. Everything I just told you. Take it. Use it however you want. Grace stood, took the papers with shaking hands. Why are you doing this? Because I'm tired, Mrs. Ashford. Tired of being the man I've become. Tired of living with guilt buried so deep I convinced myself it didn't exist. Warren looked at Sam. You were right. Catherine wouldn't want this. Wouldn't want me destroying lives to build monuments to my own pain. Sam felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. What happens now, Warren? Now I turn myself in. Face charges for conspiracy in Thomas's death. Accept whatever consequences come. Warren smiled sadly. Strange. I've spent 16 years wanting to kill you, Sam. And all it took to let that go was realizing you'd been carrying my guilt all along. I'm sorry, Sam said, for not telling you sooner, for letting you become this. No, I made my own choices. Catherine's death broke me, but I chose what to do with the broken pieces. Warren extended his hand. Thank you for trying to protect me, even from myself. Sam shook his hand, felt the grip of a man unburdening himself of weight carried too long. Grace gathered the papers, evidence enough to win in any court, but there was no triumph in her expression. Just weariness. My husband is still dead. Yes, Warren said, and I can't bring him back, but I can make sure Jack Malone answers for what he did. Can make sure the water rights go to you as they should have from the start. It's not enough. I know it's not, but it's what I can offer. They left the hotel in silence, Sam and Grace walking side by side through afternoon light. Dale and Frank climbed down from their positions, read the tension in their expressions, asked no questions. At Grace's ranch, she spread the papers on her kitchen table. The survey map, Warren's confession, legal proof of everything they'd suspected. Victory wrapped in tragedy. I should feel relieved, Grace said quietly. We won. We have the evidence. Thomas's discovery is protected, Warren's confessed. But Thomas is still gone, Sam finished. Yes. Grace's hand rested on the survey map, touching Thomas's handwriting. Nothing brings him back. Not justice, not revenge, not even the truth. Sam had no comfort to offer that wasn't hollow. Some losses couldn't be fixed or balanced or made right. You just carried them, found ways to keep living despite the weight. You should file the water claim tomorrow, he said. Get it official before Warren changes his mind or something else goes wrong. Will you come with me to Cheyenne? If you want. Grace looked at him, then really looked. Sam, why are you doing all this? You could have stayed out of it, kept living quietly on your ranch. Because 16 years ago I failed to save someone. Because 4 years ago I stopped trying to do the work I was trained for. Because when you came to my door asking for help, I remembered what it felt like to have a purpose beyond just surviving. Sam moved to the door, stopped. And because Thomas trusted me to protect you if something happened to him. I'm not failing that trust. After Sam left, Grace sat alone with the evidence of her husband's murder and her own hard-won justice. Outside, the sun set over land that was hers by right and law and blood. Tomorrow they'd ride to Cheyenne, would file the claim, would start the process of holding Warren and Jack accountable. But tonight, Grace allowed herself to grieve. Not for what she'd lost, but for the man she'd loved and the future they'd planned in the brutal way it had all been stolen. Sam rode home through twilight, mind heavy with Warren's confession and Catherine's long-buried truth. 16 years he'd carried that lie. 16 years of letting Warren hate him. And now the truth was out, and somehow it changed nothing and everything simultaneously. At his ranch, Dale met him at the barn. Everything all right, boss, Warren confessed, to ordering Thomas's harassment, to conspiracy in his death. Dale whistled low. That's good, right? It's complicated. Sam unsaddled his horse, began the familiar work of rubbing down the animal. Justice doesn't always feel like winning. Henry Stone used to say something about that, about how doing right isn't the same as feeling good. Sam smiled despite himself. You remember Henry? Met him a few times when I first came to the territory. Good man, tough but fair. Dale leaned against the stall door. He'd be proud of what you're doing here, boss. Standing up for that widow. Maybe, or maybe he'd tell me I should have done it 4 years ago instead of hiding. You weren't hiding, you were healing. There's a difference. Sam hoped that was true. Hoped Henry would see this fight as redemption rather than too little too late. But he'd never know. The dead kept their judgments to themselves. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Catherine's face. Kept hearing Warren's broken voice saying, I killed her. Kept wondering if telling the truth 16 years earlier would have prevented Thomas's death, would have kept Warren from becoming the kind of man who ordered murder for property. Near midnight, he heard hoofbeats, grabbed his rifle, moved to the window, Grace riding hard, something wrong in the way she sat the saddle. Sam met her at the door. What happened? Snakes, Grace said, voice shaking. 5 of them, dead, on my porch, all with rope marks around their tails. Sam's blood went cold. Someone released them. They were trying to kill me, Sam. Not just scare me, kill me. Grace dismounted, nearly fell. Sam caught her. Warren confessed this afternoon. Someone's covering tracks. Jack Malone. Sam helped Grace inside, sat her down. Warren confessed. Jack knows he's next. He's tying up loose ends. What do I do? Sam made a decision then. The kind that couldn't be unmade. You stay here tonight. Tomorrow we don't ride to Cheyenne to file paperwork. Tomorrow we end this. We find Jack Malone and we bring him in, dead or alive. Grace looked up, fear and determination warring in her expression. How? We set a trap, use you as bait one more time. But this time when he comes, we're ready. We end it. Sam loaded his rifle with practiced efficiency. No more legal delays. No more waiting for the system to work. Jack tried to kill you tonight. Next time he might succeed. So we finish this now. That's not the legal way. No, but it's the only way that guarantees you survive. Sam met her eyes. You said you trusted me to protect you. This is me protecting you. Whatever it takes. Grace stood, moved to the window, looked out at darkness, finally turned back. All right, we do it your way. But Sam, when this is over, when Jackie is caught or dead or whatever happens, I want you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll stop carrying guilt for people who made their own choices. Warren chose to become cruel. Jack chose to commit murder. Catherine chose to die protecting her brother. Grace stepped closer. And you chose to help me when no one else would. That's the choice that matters now. Not the ones you made 16 years ago. Sam felt something break inside him. Not shatter, just crack. Like ice at spring thaw. I'll try. That's all anyone can do. They spent the rest of the night planning. By dawn, they had a strategy. By noon, they'd be ready to spring the trap. And by sunset, one way or another, Jack Malone would answer for Thomas Ashford's murder. The price of justice, Sam had learned, wasn't measured in dollars or legal victories. It was measured in the risks you took, in the lines you crossed, in the choices you made when law and morality didn't align perfectly. Tomorrow, they'd find out if the price was one they could afford to pay. The plan was simple in the way dangerous things often were. Grace would ride into Sheridan that afternoon, broken and defeated loud enough for the right people to hear. She'd mentioned that Sam had gone to Cheyenne on business, that she'd be alone tonight, that maybe selling was the smart choice after all. Then she'd ride home and wait for whoever Warren sent to finish what the snakes hadn't. Only this time Sam would be waiting too. And Dale, and Frank, hidden in positions around the ranch with rifles loaded and patience worn thin. They'd catch Warren's men in the act, get confessions, end this before someone else died. Grace rode out mid-afternoon dust from her horse's hooves rising golden in slanted light. Sam watched her go, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. The kind that came before violence, before choices that couldn't be unmade. Dale checked his rifle for the 3rd time. You think they'll come tonight? If they're smart, they'll wait, scout the place, make sure it's really a trap. Sam loaded his own weapon with practiced efficiency. But Jack Malone isn't smart. He's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. like trying to kill a woman who's got three armed men protecting her. Exactly like that. They positioned themselves as the sun dipped toward the mountains. Frank in the barn loft with clear sight lines to the house. Dale behind the water trough with cover and good angles. Sam in the shadows near the porch where he could respond fast if things went wrong inside. Grace sat at her kitchen table, lamplit curtains open, visible to anyone watching. She had Thomas's Winchester across her lap, Sam's Colt on the table within reach. Her hands were steady now. No trembling, the fear she'd carried for months transformed into something harder. Sam had seen that transformation before, in men who'd been pushed too far and finally pushed back, in women who discovered they were stronger than everyone, including themselves, had believed. Grace Ashford wasn't a victim anymore. She was a warrior waiting for her enemy to make the final mistake. Darkness fell, complete moon hidden behind clouds, the kind of night that made every sound carry and every shadow suspect. Hours passed. 9 o'clock, 10, 11. At 11:30, Sam heard horses. Three of them moving slow, trying for quiet, and mostly succeeding. He pressed deeper into shadowy hand on his revolver, watching shapes materialize from darkness. Jack Malone led unmistakable even in silhouette. Behind him, two others. One young, moving nervous. One older, comfortable with violence. They dismounted 50 yards from the house, tied horses to a fence rail, approached on foot. Sam let them get close. Wanted them committed. Wanted no question of intent when this ended in blood or confession. Jack reached the porch, first tried the door. Locked. He gestured to the younger man who produced tools for breaking the latch. The older man moved to a window, peering inside at Grace sitting alone. That's when Sam stepped from shadow, revolver raised. "That's far enough, gentlemen." All three spun, hands reaching for weapons. Sam's voice cut through the night, hard as iron. "Don't! Frank's got a rifle on you, from the barn. Dale's behind you with another. You draw, you die. Make smart choices." Jack's hand froze halfway to his gun. The older man harder let his hand fall, but the younger one panicked and stupid went for his weapon anyway. Sam shot him in the shoulder before the gun cleared leather. The crack of gunfire split the night echo rolling across the valley. The young man went down screaming, clutching his arm. Grace burst from the house, rifle raised, face fierce. "Nobody else move." Jack raised his hand slowly. "You're making a mistake, Garrett. The mistake was coming then here. The mistake was thinking I'd let you finish what you started with Thomas." Sam moved closer, keeping the revolver steady. "On your knees, all of you." The older man complied without argument. Jack hesitated, then lowered himself, eyes calculating angles and odds. The wounded younger man was already down, bleeding, but alive. Dale emerged from cover. Frank climbed down from the loft. Between them, they had 4 weapons on 3 men. The math was clear. Sam approached the wounded man, kicked his gun away. The kid, because up close that's what he was, couldn't be more than 19. "What's your name?" "Billy. Billy Carter." "Billy, you're bleeding. Not dying, but bleeding. You want a doctor or you want to talk first?" "I'll talk." Billy's voice was tight with pain and fear. "I'll tell you everything. Just please get me help." Grace knelt beside him, pressed cloth against the wound. "Then start talking." And Billy Carter, 19 years old and terrified, and staring at consequences for the first time in his short life, told them everything. How Warren had paid him $500 to poison Thomas. How he'd put laudanum in Thomas's whiskey on a trail ride made him dizzy and disoriented. How when Thomas's horse spooked near the river, Billy had cut the saddle straps, let Thomas fall, watched him hit his head on rocks. How Billy had dragged the unconscious man into shallow water, held him under until bubbles stopped. Grace's hands shook as she listened, but she kept pressure on the wound, kept Billy alive, even as he described killing her husband. Warren said it had to look accidental. Billy continued, words tumbling out like confession. "Said no one could know. Paid me another $200 for each snake I caught and released near Mrs. Ashford's house. Told me she had to be scared enough to sell or dead enough to inherit from." "And Jack?" Sam asked quietly. "Jack forged the IOU. Got $1,000 for it. Practices signatures real good at it." Billy looked at Grace, tears mixing with sweat. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry. I needed the money. My ma's sick. I got no other way to pay for medicine. I thought—" "You thought murder was easier than honest work." Grace cut him off, voice cold. "You thought my husband's life was worth $700. Billy had no answer for that. Sam turned to Jack. Anything to add? Jack's smile was ugly. Just that you're all dead. Warren knows you're planning something. He's waiting at his estate with 20 men. You think you caught us? We're bait, Garrett. While you're wasting time here, Warren's preparing. For what? For you, for Mrs. Ashford, for anyone stupid enough to come after him. Jack's confidence was returning, reading Sam's expression. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Riding to Warren's place. Confronting him. That's exactly what he wants. Sam exchanged glances with Grace. Saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was it. The moment where they chose law or justice. Chose to ride to Cheyenne with prisoners and evidence work through proper channels, hope the system functioned. Or chose to end it tonight, whatever the cost. Grace stood still, holding the bloody cloth. We go to Warren tonight. Finish this. Grace, no, Sam. I've waited 3 months for justice. I've played by rules that protect men like Warren. I've been patient and careful and proper. She met his eyes. I'm done waiting. We have Billy's confession. We have proof. We ride to Warren's estate and we end this. Sam wanted to argue. Wanted to remind her that rushing into a fortified position against 20 armed men was suicide. But he'd seen that look before. In soldiers before battles they knew might kill them. In lawmen before raids on outlaw camps. The look of people who'd calculated the odds and decided some things were worth dying for. Dale Frank, Sam said quietly, your call. This isn't your fight. Dale checked his rifle. Boss, I've worked for you 4 years. Seen you hide from the man you used to be. About time you remembered. He looked at Grace, and any man who'd poison another deserves what's coming. Frank simply nodded, chambering around. Sam turned back to Jack. How many men does Warren really have? Enough. Wrong answer. Sam pressed the revolver against Jack's temple. I can leave you here tied up, or I can leave you here dead. Choose carefully. Jack's bravado cracked. 7. Warren has 7 men, plus himself. But they're expecting you. They're ready. Then we better not disappoint them. They bound Jack and the older man with rope, left them in the barn under guard of Grace's hired hand, an older rancher named Peterson, who'd arrived earlier to help with evening chores. Billy wounded and confessed they loaded onto a horse, hands tied under strict orders not to run. You testify against Warren, Sam told him, and maybe a judge goes easy. Maybe you see your ma again before you're old. But you try anything stupid, and I'll put the next bullet through your heart instead of your shoulder. Billy nodded, too terrified and pain-racked to do anything but comply. They rode through darkness toward Warren's estate, 4 riders and 1 prisoner, armed for battle. The journey took an hour through country Sam knew well, every ridge and hollow mapped in memory. As they approached the Blackwell property, lights appeared in the distance. Too many lights. Warren was expecting them. Grace pulled her horse alongside Sam's. Last chance to turn back. Ride to Cheyenne. Do this legal. You want to turn back? No, I want to see Warren's face when he realizes he lost. She checked her rifle. But I need to know you're with me, that this is your choice, not just following mine. Sam thought about Henry Stone, his mentor, who taught him that justice and law weren't always the same thing. Thought about Catherine, who died while Sam followed rules and procedures. Thought about Thomas, poisoned and drowned because men like Warren believed money put them above consequence. I'm with you, he said, whatever happens next. They approached the estate, slowly, weapons ready. Warren's mansion stood 2 stories tall, lit from within like a beacon. On the porch stood Warren himself, 6 men flanking him with rifles. But no one fired. Warren simply raised a hand, gestured for them to approach. Sam reined in 20 yards from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to have options. Warren, Sam, Grace, and young Billy, I see. Warren's voice carried disappointment rather than anger. I'm assuming Billy confessed. Everything, the poisoning, the murder, the snakes. Sam kept his revolver drawn but pointed down. It's over, Warren. You can surrender now, face trial, or we can end this the hard way. Warren laughed, bitter and broken. The hard way, Sam, there was no hard way. I already told you this afternoon. I'm done fighting. He gestured to his men. Lower your weapons, all of you. Boss, one of them questioned. I said lower them. This is over. The men obeyed, confusion evident, but discipline holding. Warren descended the porch steps, moved into lamplight spilling from the house. He looked older than his 52 years' weight of guilt, aging him beyond time. "Billy," Warren called. "Come here." Billy urged his horse forward, hands still bound, shoulder bleeding through makeshift bandages. He stopped in front of Warren, face pale with fear. "Did you tell them everything?" Warren asked quietly. "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry, sir. I was scared. Warren pulled a revolver from his coat, shot Billy Carter through the heart before anyone could react. The young man toppled from his horse dead before he hit ground. Grace screamed. Sam brought his weapon up. Warren's men raised theirs. For 3 seconds, the world balanced on a knife edge of violence. Then Warren dropped his revolver, raised empty hands. He was a traitor, and traitors die. That's the rule I've lived by. He looked at Sam. Just like you lived by the rule that protecting others meant taking their burdens. We're not so different, you and I. Sam's hand trembled with rage, carefully controlled. We're nothing alike. No, I've spent 16 years building an empire on guilt I couldn't face. You've spent 16 years hiding from responsibilities you couldn't carry. Warren moved closer, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. We're both cowards, Sam, just different flavors. The difference is I'm trying to do better. You're trying to drag everyone down to your level. Am I? Warren gestured at Billy's body. I just eliminated a witness, made your case harder. You could shoot me right now, claim self-defense, and no jury would convict you. But you won't, because despite everything, you still believe in law, in rules, in doing things the right way even when the right way fails. He wasn't wrong. Sam could feel it, the old training, the marshal's oath running through his blood like poison or medicine, depending on how you looked at it. Don't become the thing you're fighting. Don't let vengeance masquerade as justice. But Grace wasn't constrained by oaths or training or years of conditioning. She dismounted, walked straight to Warren, and struck him across the face hard enough to snap his head sideways. You murdered my husband, she said, voice shaking. You terrorized me for months. You killed a 19-year-old boy to protect yourself. And you have the arrogance to compare yourself to Sam. Warren touched his split lip, examined blood on his fingers. Mrs. Ashford, I'm not comparing. I'm observing. Sam and I have both spent 16 years running from truth. His truth was that I killed Catherine. Mine was that I become exactly the kind of man she'd have hated. He looked at Sam. This afternoon, when you told me what really happened on that trail, something broke inside me. Or maybe fixed. I'm tired, Sam. Tired of being this person. Tired of building empires on corpses. Then surrender, Sam said. Come to Cheyenne. Testify. Take responsibility. I intend to, but first you need to understand something. Warren turned to his men. Ride to Sheridan. Tell Sheriff Davis that I confess to conspiracy in Thomas Ashford's murder. Tell him to wire the territorial marshal. Tell him Warren Blackwell is surrendering himself to proper authority. The men hesitated. One of them, older with sergeant stripes from some forgotten war, stepped forward. Boss, you sure? I'm sure, Marcus. I'm done running, done fighting. Warren looked at Grace. The water rights are yours, Mrs. Ashford. Legally, properly, without contest. The survey map I showed you this afternoon was Thomas's original. File your claim. Build your life. I'll never bother you again. Grace studied him, searching for deception, finding only exhaustion. Why now? Because Sam reminded me of who I used to be. Before Catherine died, before guilt turned me cruel. Warren's voice was quiet. I can't bring Thomas back. Can't undo the terror I caused you. But I can stop adding to it. Can stop being the monster I became. Sam wanted to believe him. Wanted to think confession and surrender equaled redemption. But he'd seen too many men make promises in the face of consequences, only to break them when opportunity arose. You'll come with us to Cheyenne, Sam said. Tonight. We're not leaving you here to run, or to disappear, or to change your mind. Agreed. Warren collected his discarded revolver, emptied the remaining bullets, handed it to Sam. Grip first. I'm your prisoner, Marshal Garrett, though I know you don't wear the badge anymore. Some oaths don't require badges. They prepared to ride Sam, keeping Warren close, Grace retrieving Billy's body to bring to town for proper burial, despite everything. The young man had made terrible choices, but he deserved more than being left for scavengers. That's when the shot rang out. From the darkness beyond the house, lights, muzzle flash, and thunder. The bullet took Dale high in the shoulder, spun him off his horse into the dirt. Chaos erupted, everyone scattering, seeking cover weapons raised against an unseen enemy. Sam dragged Dale behind a water trough, applied pressure to the wound while scanning shadows. "Where'd it come from?" "Behind us," Dale gasped. "The ridge." More shots, 3, 4, 5 in rapid succession. Warren's men returned fire blindly, not sure what they were shooting at. Grace crouched beside the porch, rifle raised, waiting for targets. Then a voice called from darkness. Jack Malone's voice, rough with rage. "You think you won, Garrett. You think Warren's pretty speech changes anything." Jack had escaped, somehow gotten free of the ropes, left Peterson dead and or unconscious, followed them here for revenge or desperation or both. "Jack," Warren called. "Stand down, it's over." "Over for you maybe, but I'm not going to prison because you found religion." Another shot, this one splintering wood near Grace's head. "You all die tonight, Mrs. Ashford, Sam, even you, Warren. Everyone who knows what we did." Sam assessed the situation fast. Jack had high ground in darkness. They had numbers but poor cover. Dale was wounded. Warren was unarmed. Frank and Grace were capable but exposed. "Grace," Sam called quietly. "The barn. Can you reach it?" She nodded, understanding his intent without explanation. While Jack focused on the main group, Grace could circle, get into the barn, use the height to counter Jack's position. She moved low and fast, rifle clutched tight, disappeared into shadow. Sam counted to 10, then stood deliberately, making himself a target, drawing Jack's fire. Bullets whined past too close, Sam's nerve holding by pure will. One grazed his left cheek, a burning line of fire from ear to jaw. Blood ran warm, but Sam didn't stop, didn't falter. There would be time for pain later. He returned fire, not aiming to hit, but to keep Jack's attention fixed. Saw muzzle flashes from the ridge mark the position. Then from the barn, different angle, Grace's rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Precise shots measured each one, forcing Jack to move or die. "Frank," Sam ordered, "flank left, get around behind him." Frank moved like smoke, using terrain and darkness, working toward Jack's position from an unexpected angle. Sam kept firing, keeping Jack pinned, burning through ammunition but buying time. Warren grabbed the rifle from one of his men, joined the firefight despite being technically a prisoner. "Jack worked for me. This is my responsibility." Sam wanted to argue but couldn't spare attention. Jack was good, well-trained, using every advantage of position and concealment. But he was alone against multiple shooters, and even the best couldn't maintain that imbalance forever. Frank's rifle spoke from new position, the sharp crack of impact, Jack's scream confirming hit. Not fatal, but damaging. Jack's return fire grew erratic, desperate. Grace moved in the barn. Sam saw her silhouette against the window, lining up a shot. She fired, and Jack's rifle fell silent. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Frank called out, "Got him? He's down." They found Jack Malone at the base of the ridge, blood spreading from wounds in his leg and chest. Frank's shot had clipped his thigh. Grace's had punched through his ribs, missing the heart but collapsing a lung. He wouldn't last long without a doctor. Sam knelt beside him. "Jack, it's done. Tell me who else was involved. Give me names. Maybe we can get you help in time." Jack coughed, blood smiled through red teeth. "Just me and Warren and Billy, that's all. Warren thought he was giving orders. I was doing the work." He coughed again, worse. "Tell Warren, tell him I'm sorry. For Catherine. For everything after." "You knew," Sam asked him. "About Catherine?" "Saw it happen. Saw Warren's bullet hit her. Saw you take the blame." Jack's breathing rattled. "Why'd you do that? Why let him destroy you?" "Because she asked me to. Because some lies are kinder than truth." "Stupid," Jack whispered. "Kindness gets you killed out here." His eyes fixed on something beyond Sam, beyond the ridge, beyond Wyoming territory entirely. "Guess I'm proof of that." Jack Malone died at 2 in the morning under stars that didn't care. Sam closed his eyes, checked for pulse that was already gone. Another body, another consequence, another name added to the list of people whose choices led them here. Dale's wound was painful but not fatal. Grace bandaged it properly while Warren's men prepared horses for the long ride to Cheyenne. Warren himself helped carry Jack's body loaded onto a pack horse, the same treatment they'd given Billy. "2 men dead because of me," Warren said quietly. "2 more on the list." Two men dead because of their own choices, Sam corrected. Billy chose murder for money. Jack chose loyalty to the wrong cause. You carry a responsibility for creating the situation. They carry responsibility for how they acted in it. Philosophy won't resurrect them. No, but blame accurately placed prevents repeating mistakes. They rode through what remained of night, reaching Sheridan at dawn. Sheriff Davis met them in the street, saw the prisoners and bodies and evidence, and for once in his corrupt career did his job. He placed Warren under arrest, took statements, wired the territorial marshal. Marcus Webb arrived 2 days later, examined the evidence, listened to testimonies. Grace filed her water claim properly with Thomas's original survey and Webb's documentation. The claim was approved without contest. Warren's trial happened in Cheyenne 6 weeks later. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy in Thomas Ashford's murder, to fraud, to a dozen lesser charges accumulated over years of cutting corners and buying influence. The judge sentenced him to 15 years hard labor. But Warren never served the sentence. 3 months into incarceration infection from an untreated wound during the night, Jack attack turned septic. Warren Blackwell died in a prison hospital, 52 years old. Fortune unclaimed, legacy ashes. Sam learned of his death from a telegraph message. Read it twice, felt something twist in his chest that might have been grief or relief or the complicated mixture both emotions created. He walked to the cemetery, stood at Catherine's grave, told her that Warren finally knew the truth, that maybe in those last months he'd found some measure of peace. The wind carried no answer, but Sam hadn't expected one. 6 months after Warren's trial on a spring morning when the Bighorn Mountains still wore snowcaps, but the valley had thawed, Sam stood on Grace's porch with a question that had taken him 44 years to learn how to ask. Grace Ashford, I'm no prize. I'm 14 years older than you. I carry ghosts that'll never fully leave. I spent 16 years hiding from the man I should have been. He took her hand, rough meeting, rough calluses earned through shared labor. But if you'll have me, I'd like to spend whatever years remain trying to be the man Thomas trusted, the man you deserve. Grace smiled, and for the first time since Thomas died, the expression reached her eyes completely. Sam Garrett, I don't need the man Thomas trusted. I need the man who stood beside me when everyone else walked away. The man who taught me to fight. The man who chose justice even when it cost him. She squeezed his hand. That man I'll marry tomorrow if he asks. They married the following week in a simple ceremony at Grace's ranch, now legally registered Ashford Garrett Ranch. Dale and Frank stood witness. Half of Sheridan attended despite, or perhaps because of the scandal. Widows weren't supposed to remarry so quickly. Men weren't supposed to marry women they'd fought beside. Sam and Grace didn't care about supposed to. They'd earned each other through blood and choice, and the kind of trust that only forms when you've seen someone at their worst and chosen them anyway. The years that followed were good. Hard because ranching was always hard, but good. Sam taught Grace everything Henry Stone had taught him about justice and integrity and standing for principle when standing cost everything. Grace taught Sam about forgiveness, about letting go of guilt that served no purpose, about building forward instead of looking back. They made the artesian spring a resource for the entire valley, offering water to neighboring ranches without charge, creating cooperation where competition had ruled. The gesture transformed the community, reminded people that scarcity was often manufactured and abundance shared, multiplied. In 1887, Grace gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas Henry, honoring both the man who'd discovered the spring and the marshal who'd taught Sam what law truly meant. The boy grew up strong and steady, learning ranching from both parents, learning justice from stories told on long evenings. Grace died in 1899 from stomach cancer that ate her from inside over 6 agonizing months, the kind that frontier medicine couldn't stop. She faced death the same way she'd faced life after Thomas, with courage that didn't deny fear, but refused to let fear win. Her last words to Sam were simple. Thank you for everything, for standing, for fighting, for loving me enough to let me fight beside you. Sam buried her next to Thomas on land she'd defended with blood and law and sheer stubborn will. He carved both names on a single stone. Thomas Ashford, discoverer. Grace Garrett, warrior. Both loved, both remembered, both proof that some fights are worth whatever they cost. And now, 2 years after Grace's death, Sam Garrett sat on his porch with his grandson James, telling the story that explained the scar and the ghosts and the choices that shaped everything after. So Grandma Grace saved your life, James said, 14 years old, and already understanding more than most adults about what truly mattered. She did. But more than that, she gave me a reason to use my life for something beyond surviving. Sam stood, joints protesting age, but body still functional. Come with me. I want to show you something. They walked to the barn where Sam kept artifacts from his past. Marshal Henry Stone's badge worn smooth by years of wear. Catherine's photograph faded, but still capturing her smile. Thomas's hammer, the one he'd used to build fences that outlasted him. Grace's rifle, the Winchester she'd fired the night they'd brought down Jack Malone. These are my ghosts, James, Sam said, touching each object with reverence for memory. Every person we lose leaves a ghost. The question isn't whether we carry ghosts, it's whether we let them haunt us or inspire us. What's the difference? Haunting is when you live in the past wishing things had gone different. Inspiration is when you learn from the past and do better going forward. Sam handed James the badge. Henry Stone taught me that justice isn't about being fearless. It's about doing right even when you're terrified. And Catherine taught me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is carry someone else's burden, even when it costs you. And Thomas taught me that discovering something valuable creates responsibility. He found that spring and understood it wasn't just his. It was for everyone who needed it. And Grandma Grace, Sam smiled, feeling the familiar ache of loss softened by time and gratitude. Grace taught me the most important lesson. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. About fighting for what's right even when the odds say you'll lose. They walked to the artesian springs, still flowing strong after 44 years, water clear and cold and constant. Sam and James stood beside it, listening to the music of water running over stone. Your great-grandfather Thomas discovered this, Sam said. Your grandmother fought for it. I helped her keep it. Now it supplies water for 15 ranches across this valley, free to anyone who needs it. Why free? You could charge. Make money. Because money isn't legacy, James. What you do for others, that's legacy. How you make the world better for the next generation, that's what lasts. Sam put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Someday this land will be yours. The spring and the cattle, all of it. What will you do with it? James thought about it, young face serious with consideration. I'll share it, like Grandma did, like you taught me. That's how we honor the dead son. We live better than they could. We take what they gave us and we build on it. We don't waste our inheritance on selfishness. They sat beside the spring as the sun tracked toward evening, two generations connected by blood and story, and the understanding that some things mattered more than the survival. Sam felt old, felt the weight of 60 years in the battles they'd contained, but he also felt satisfied. He'd failed Catherine, had hidden from responsibility for 4 years. But when Grace Ashford had come to him asking for help, Sam had remembered what it meant to stand for something, had remembered Henry Stone's lessons about justice and Marshall's oaths that didn't require badges. And in standing for Grace and fighting beside her, in building a life after victory and loss, and everything between, Sam had finally become the man Henry had believed he could be. Not perfect, not without regrets, but honest, principled, willing to act when action was required. Grandpa, James said quietly. Do you miss them, Grandma Grace and the others? Every day. Sam looked at the mountains, purple in twilight, eternal as truth. But missing someone and being destroyed by their absence are different things. I miss Grace. I miss Henry. I even miss Catherine and Thomas, though I barely knew them. But I don't regret any of it. Why not? Because regret is wishing the past was different. Acceptance is learning from the past and choosing better in the present. Sam stood and offered his hand to help James up. Your grandmother saved my life by giving me a reason to use it, by showing me that one person's courage can change what a whole community believes is possible. They walked back toward the house as stars appeared, Bighorn Mountains silhouetted against darkening sky. At the door, James stopped. Grandpa, when I'm older, when it's my turn to make choices, how will I know if I'm doing right? Sam thought about that. Thought about every choice he'd made, good and bad, brave and cowardly. Thought about Henry Stone and Catherine Blackwell and Thomas Ashford and Grace Garrett and all the people whose lives had intersected his and shaped who he became. You listen to the voice inside that sounds like the best people you've known, Sam said finally. You ask what they would do, what they would think of your choices, and you act with integrity even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. That's what you did. What Grandma did. That's what we tried to do. Didn't always succeed, but we tried. Sam opened the door, warm light spilling out. And trying, really trying with everything you have, that's all anyone can ask. That's all that really matters in the end. Inside, Sam built a fire against the evening chill. James sat beside him, comfortable in shared silence. Outside, the wind carried memory across land that had witnessed violence and redemption loss and love justice pursued and sometimes rarely achieved. Sam closed his eyes, felt the presence of ghosts, not haunting, but accompanying. Henry Stone teaching integrity. Catherine Blackwell showing sacrifice. Thomas Ashford demonstrating vision. Grace Garrett proving courage. They were gone. All of them. But they lived in stories told in lessons passed down and choices made because someone before had shown a better way. That night in 1885, when Grace had come to his door asking for help, Sam had been hiding from the kind of man he'd been trained to be. Hiding from responsibility. From purpose. From the oath he'd sworn when Henry Stone had pinned a marshal's badge to his chest. But Grace hadn't let him hide, had dragged him back into the fight, had reminded him that some things were worth standing for, even when standing guaranteed pain. And in standing beside her, Sam had found not just purpose, but redemption. Had discovered that failing Catherine didn't mean he had to fail everyone after. That one woman's death didn't negate the oath to protect all the living. The fire crackled. James dozed beside him. Outside, the artesian spring flowed constant feeding land and livestock and legacy. Sam thought about water, how it shaped stone through patience and persistence, how it gave life but could also take it, how Thomas had discovered it and Grace had fought for it, and together they transformed scarcity into abundance through choice rather than law. That was the real lesson, not that justice always won, not that courage always triumphed, but that ordinary people making extraordinary choices could change what seemed unchangeable, could stand against power and cruelty and win not through force, but through refusing to break. Grace Ashford had been nobody, a widow, a woman alone in territory that ground down women alone. She should have sold, should have run, should have let Warren Blackwell take what he wanted because fighting seemed futile. But she'd fought anyway, and in fighting had discovered she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had believed. That strength had saved Sam's life by giving him something to save besides himself, had reminded him that law without courage was just words, that justice without action was just philosophy. 16 years later, sitting by firelight with his grandson Sam, understood finally what Henry Stone had tried to teach him. That being a lawman wasn't about badges or authority or power. It was about standing between the innocent and the cruel. About using whatever you had, skills or courage or simple, stubborn refusal to quit, to make the world incrementally better. Some men left empires. Some left fortunes. Sam was leaving stories, lessons. The memory of a man who'd failed and hidden, and finally when it mattered most stood up again. That would have to be enough. That would have to be legacy. James stirred open, sleepy eyes. Grandpa, will you tell me another story tomorrow about when you were a marshal? Tomorrow, Sam promised. Tonight, rest. You've got work in the morning. After James went to bed, Sam sat alone by dying firelight thinking about Grace, about the sound of her laugh, the way she looked holding a rifle, fierce and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable, the feeling of her hand in his on their wedding day. I hope I did right by you, he whispered to empty air and present ghosts. I hope Thomas would be proud. I hope Henry would say, I finally learned the lesson. The wind answered, carrying sound that might have been agreement or might have been just wind. Sam stood, banked the fire-checked locks from old habit, walked to the bedroom that had been his, and Grace's still carried her scent in blankets and memory. Lay down on familiar mattress, closed eyes against darkness and time. Tomorrow he'd wake, would tend cattle and mend fence and teach James about ranching and integrity and standing for principle when standing cost everything. Would live one more day as the man Grace Ashford had believed he could be when she'd ridden to his ranch asking for help from a stranger. would honor her memory by being worthy of it. That was legacy. That was love. That was justice. Everything else was just survival. And Sam Garrett had learned through blood and loss and hard-won wisdom that surviving wasn't enough. Living was what mattered. Living with purpose. Living with integrity. Living in ways that left the world incrementally better. Grace had taught him that. In fighting beside her, in loving her, in watching her face death with the same courage she'd faced life. Some lessons cost everything to learn, but they were worth it. They were always worth it.